Timeless, the human experience through a quantum lens. Hello and welcome to Timeless. This is a podcast brought to you by me, Isabel Soden.
And by myself, Clive Hyland.
Together we work on PlayLab, that is the coming together of art and science to explore and realise human potential. And this very special podcast called Timeless is about Clive.
It's about the fundamentals of human nature, bringing in some science very much in a relatable way. That's the whole point. I don't want people to think of this as just science. It's trying to open up the pages of science to a much wider audience.
Yeah. And how did you come to be sitting across from me making this podcast? Give me a nutshell of your experience and interest in it.
Okay. Well, it was quantum at work, really, but we'll leave that aside for the moment. Basically, if I look very quickly back on my history, I think I've always been a natural student of human behaviour. Right back at school time and all that sort of stuff, I was always fascinated by what made people react the way they did. And in my study life, that took me through areas like sociology and psychology. But in 2005, I discovered neuroscience, and I've been working with it for ever since that time, so 20 years, and using those insights in organizational world primarily, but not just that. But I was always left with this feeling that there was more. And whilst I love and continue to love neuroscience, I then started to think we need to understand the energetic domain. So whilst people may see the term quantum physics, it may be more relatable for them to think in terms of energy. So it's about the scientific understanding of energy and what is happening around us and inside of us. And now that can bring to the table a new perspective on human nature. And obviously we'll expand on that as we go through.
Can I have a nutshell on energy as I and the listener should understand it?
Yeah, so use the iceberg model, which I think a lot of people will have come across, and it's all about the difference between what's happening in the perceivable world above the surface and what's going on below. And the reality is that when we get into the physics of it, the rules that we use in understanding the perceivable or material world do not work below the surface. Energy works on different principles that we don't fully understand, but knowing that the material world does not work in the energetic world is an important starting point for the conversation, because it all opens up all sorts of other possibilities. And I think I'm not confident about what the absolute solution is. I think I can be confident to say our current thinking is incredibly narrow. Mm-hmm. So we have a very narrow perspective on the nature of human beings and the nature of the universe. And by the way, ultimately, those things are inseparable. So is that okay as a starter?
Yeah, it's a lovely start. And for our main course, tell me about how we understand transformation at the moment.
Yeah, so I guess what I'm aware of is, we'll get into in the next session, what some of the classic dilemmas were within physics as quantum physics emerged, and how you deal with the scope of that emerging information. But in essence, what we're trying to do is open up a whole world whereby, we can take another look at human nature. And what that really means is that getting below the surface, we can start to see the suggestion of huge potential that's untapped in that domain. And it's the energy and the energetic connection and dimensions of our existence that we've largely ignored up until now. They've been kept in the lab for good reasons. I'm not saying, there's anything sinister going on here, but it's about physicists doing what physicists do. Mm-hmm. But actually, the implications of this are human the consequences of human level are absolutely fundamental. Let me just give you one example. Okay, in physics, the first law of thermodynamics is that energy cannot be created or destroyed; it can only be transformed. All right. So, other people may have come across that, and within physics, yeah, that's fine. But if you stop and think about that, that's hugely fundamental in our thought patterns, because if energy can't be created, it must have been there forever. And it must go on forever if it can't be destroyed.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we as human beings struggle to cope with concepts of forever.
Mm-hmm.
And if you extrapolate that outwards, that really means you're dealing with a universe that is infinite. And we can't deal with that stuff. We haven't got brains that can cope with an understanding of the infinite.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one little perspective on where our understanding of the quantum realm is challenging us and saying it ain't like you thought it was. It's actually fundamentally different.
Okay.
And what we've got to work out as human beings is how significant is that difference for the way that we are embarking on our lives. My suspicion is it's hugely significant, and it explains major reasons why we've created the mess that we currently have, the global mess, which I think few people would dispute, but also things like why we are trapped with such high levels of burnout and anxiety in societies. There must be a reason why we're in this unhappy place, and we search for happiness despite our environment, rather than just happiness being a natural state of who we are. Am I getting you hooked?
Yeah, I'm really interested. I mean, I have questions bouncing into my brain. One of them is when you say this is something, the quantum element of material stuff was left in a lab. And then we carried on in our kind of materialist
way. Yeah.
Why was it left in the lab?
Well, we'll go in more depth in a future session, but in essence, it's like, when quantum physics started exploring and demonstrating that energy operates differently, it was such a shake-up for the physics community. This was back in the 1920s. That the physics community itself, they were the first to become aware of this, had to decide what are we going to do about this. And there were alternative views. So you had somebody like Einstein who would be saying, look, these are life fundamental questions, and we must try to deal with them. But you'd have other people, and particularly a guy called Niels Bohr, that said, no, we need to carry on focusing on what we know, what we can understand, and that which will enable us to transform our external world. So the harnessing of quantum power, if you like, which is, drives supercomputing and has been used in so many other instances of, physics as we've gone through the century. So it's about then, how do you deal with these bigger questions? You can quite reasonably say, as a physicist, that stuff is too weird and it's not accessible to science. Nobody in physics actually argues that the rules are different between the material world and the energetic world. But the question is, how far do you go with that stuff?
Yeah.
And when we are now, probably more so than when this information emerged, we are more aware now of the potential crises that's facing us all. So those life questions, rather than just the physics questions, need to come back on the table. Because sitting down and just calculating, which was the phrase, is not the way to deal with it now. That's a heads down approach. And if we don't go to heads up and look around at what's happening, it seems to me that we're going to run off a cliff edge. We're in big danger.
Okay. So this is your urgent call to action.
Absolutely.
And attention.
Yeah. And I know there's a certain switch there from, a place of fun, which is important, I think, for learning, right? But it's like, it's a difficult balance, and I don't want to scare people, but equally, it's irresponsible not to point out the dangers that we potentially face. Yeah. Whilst there's time to do something about it. Let's not wait until, it's all too late. That's doomsday. we're not at doomsday, but we should be at wake up day.
Okay. Don't worry. I will keep it fun. I promise.
Yeah. You need to keep me sane as well.
Yeah, okay. So here we are, facing doomsday, possibly. And we've deviated from this quantum sense of things because it didn't feel in line with our material way of thinking. But you just said that quantum mechanics, quantum computing is something that is now manifest in the material world. So presumably, I mean, are we still thinking, is this right? Or are we just actually just failing to walk through the full consequences of...
I think the latter, to be honest, because I think we are just carrying on and doing it. Now I think this is where just a little discourse around AI is interesting because, most people in the AI communities, including the users, are just doing it. They're looking at the potential and how they can take it forward. And look, I don't want to paint it as something sinister. It's not. It can do some amazing things, but I don't think there's enough thinking through of the consequences. But that is changing. There are key players from within the AI world, including people that have stepped out of Google, etc., that are saying we need to be very aware of this because there are huge challenges associated with how we sustain the essence of human beings if we hand over the wrong sort of controls to machinery. So that wasn't an issue back in the early 20th century. We hadn't got to that point. We weren't, concerned with global crises in terms of climate, and we didn't have AI on the horizon, but we do now. So this is all about, as I said, we got time, bringing it back and saying, let's have another look, because there are dangers ahead, and now is the time to start thinking differently about our futures.
Yeah. Okay.
Still couldn't throw a joke in there, could I?
No. Still not funny, Clive.
No, still not funny. No. Oh, we'll have to jump between the two then.
If we do, let's make a promise now. If we do a whole episode that has no lightheartedness, you will end on a knock-knock joke.
Yeah, okay, fair enough.
Okay.
That's my penance, for not
Clive's
behaving
promise.
myself, yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool.
Okay. So just winding back, there's 1920s. We have, we're in the laboratory and you talk about this divergence. And tell me about what happened then. We have this kind of rationalist point of view and we've become terribly attached to it. What happens to science, art, religion, philosophy when we head down that materialist route?
Right. So what I won't do at this stage is go through all the nooks and crannies of the 20th century. Let's just jump forward to where we are now, I think. Mm-hmm. So it seems that our tradition, intentionally or otherwise, has been to polarize knowledge. Okay, so that you're either a scientist or you're into spirituality, even within science, you're either into the materialist perspective or into a quantum perspective. You sit in different camps, okay? And I understand from a neuroscience point of view why that happens. We'll come back to that another time. But this is now a time when we are facing such big challenges where we need to converge that knowledge. That's my point, is science shouldn't be dismissing stuff which is outside of science. And neither should people in the non-science world ignore science. We need to get the best of everything on the table so we can have these conversations. And the quantum world actually gives us permission to do that because, as I've said, energy does not follow the rules of matter. When you're into pure energy, we don't really know how it works. But we know all energy is connected, and that immediately brings up a whole concept around there is something bigger than us. And when we talk about there being something bigger than us, other conversations around belief, around intuition, around spirituality should all be at the table because they have a right to be invited to that dinner party. Mm-hmm. Yeah. In a sensible way. I am not patient at all with nonsense that can be talked about in some of these areas where there's for instance, no scientific basis whatsoever. I'm always looking for some, right? But my view would be that a lot of people are too rigid about the boundaries, of science, and basically sort of saying, if science can't prove it, it doesn't exist.
Yeah.
We know that's nonsense.
Yeah.
If science can't prove it, science can't prove it. All right. That doesn't devalue science in any way. It just means that's as far as we can go at this stage. And to have some respect for other views, providing this thought through, I think is really important. So that then brings this whole convergence, around philosophy and psychology and, neuroscience, quantum physics, spirituality. We need all of that stuff on the table, because while science is wonderful, it doesn't have any complete answers.
Yeah. And we are a living, breathing embodiment of that as
Absolutely.
Immersive experience director
Totally.
and writer, and you, corporate C-suite.
Yeah. Boring suit.
The suit. Turned neuroscientist, and here we are having a conversation. And I mean, this is the end of or this is the kind of summit of a lot of conversations that we've had over it. And it has been lovely to see, experiences that I've had as an artist creating things that you can almost explain from your scientific perspective, and the high five that you get across when there is that kind of gap in experience or knowledge or data point. That's where the conversation begins.
Absolutely. And I think the props the word that combines it all is intelligence. So it's like intelligence can arrive in many forms. You've got the very linear intelligence, if you like, of science, but you've got the associated intelligence of art, maybe the intuitive intelligence of belief, and that type of stuff. So it's really about giving that respect and bringing together in such a way that opens up a new converged form of thinking for us, rather than the polarization that exists at the moment, which is just not healthy. So a little aspect of neuroscience, because you mentioned about that. Yeah, I understand. The instinctive part of the brain is the fastest moving part of the brain that will very quickly identify whether a person or a comment sits in one camp or another, because our first response is about the instinctive brain is looking for, is there a threat, or is this something I should feel okay about? Okay. Mm-hmm. If we identify somebody's thinking as being threatening, we've already, engineering the brain at that time to look for the evidence to support the threat. Okay. So we're already, if you like, off into a negative mode. So if we're a scientist and we see somebody as a spiritualist, right, there's every chance we are then going to look for all the information that destroys any spiritual argument. Okay, because at the beginning we've identified this is a threat.
Yeah.
A threat to my pattern of thought.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And part of this is challenging that and sort of saying, let's try to avoid those barriers, the fear that creeps in that actually stops us listening.
Yeah.
And stops us understanding the other person's perspective.
Yeah.
Because we need everyone's contribution now. Yeah. We need to get to a point where we look again at what we understand. And that links back, I guess, to the whole principle of the title, which is, this is timeless. It's not only about the preoccupation with science and linear thinking that we've had over the last couple of centuries. It's about timeless wisdom and continuing to accumulate everything we can bring to the table that can offer us something for the future.
Oh, I love that.
Good. It wasn't very funny, though, was it?
No, it's still not funny.
No, I got to work on that.
But a great, great return to the top line.
Yeah.
Okay. So, timeless thinking and the convergence of different disciplines to get over their tribal sense of identity and come together. I mean, and there was a huge convergence of different disciplines back in the day in order to understand human existence or the human nature, and it's become very siloed. So yeah.
Well, I mean, the amplification of that is like Da Vinci, who was sort of as much an artist as he was a scientist.
Absolutely.
And Yeah, what the phrase was: if physics is the king of the sciences, and art is surely his queen.
Yeah.
So in those days, before Newton came on, you can't blame Newton. It's what we've done with it, But when we then went in this duality, between science and non-science,
Yeah.
could be religion, art, etc., it just pushed us into separate corners. And nowadays, we really have to ask, why are we preoccupied with being right or wrong? Why isn't it about just mutual understanding and acknowledging that other perspectives are allowed? And it's then what we do with that stuff. And the quantum debate, when we get into it, will support that. It will say that everything we believe in is a result of our perspective, what we observe and how we interpret that. So, actually, whether there's a true independent reality is highly up for debate. And therefore, whether there's any truth around right or wrong is also up for debate. It's all about perspectives and understanding. So that's when we'll get into the deeper stuff.
Delicious.
And I really have to work out a joke in advance on that one.
Yeah, don't worry. I rather than a joke, I've got a giant brag. We are timeless.
Yep.
The Da Vinci of podcasts, king and queen.
Oh, of
meeting.
course, yes, of course. Why didn't I see that? Yeah, of course.
So, yeah, welcome to the Da Vinci podcast.
Yeah.
And so this was episode 1. I really hope we have wet your whistle and given you a good map for the terrain that we will broadly be scampering about in the coming episodes. Episode 2, Clive, tell us what it's going to look like.
Well, that's when we are going to get into the energy discussion, so quantum physics in particular. And the way that I will deal with that is to explain what our current understanding of the universe is, with all the anomalies and contradictions, and there are many of them. That's the point. So we'll get into things like dark energy and dark matter, and equally at the genuine quantum level, we'll talk a little bit more about how energy does operate and what we discovered at the early part of the 20th century that shook physics to its foundations, really. But now we're getting it back on the table, because I guess my contention is how can you understand the iceberg if you don't understand what's going on below the water? And we are working with such a limited view of human nature. It's not surprising we've got ourselves in a cul-de-sac and we're just going round in circles. So time to get out of the cul-de-sac, get back into what's really going on, and how do we explore those depths. I've probably mixed my analogies a bit there.
A lot of metaphors
well,
there,
I
was with you. The iceberg and the cul-de-sac.
Yeah, let me call that convergence. Yeah. Don't say contradictions.
No, absolutely. I was with you.
Yeah.
I just did have a giant...
We went from a boat to a car or something then, didn't we?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Well, let's be patient.
But you know what? You had me. I'm sold. I can't wait to get cracking on episode 2. And I really hope you will join us. And we look forward to feeling you with us then.